Welcome to the Debrief protocol. Today, we're diving into what we call Layer 3. This is that exact point of integration, right where your raw human experience perfectly intersects with the underlying system architecture of your life. We aren't really asking why you might be afraid of change today, we're investigating something much deeper. We're looking at what actually happens when the absolute cheapest structural path in your life becomes what you confidently call your personal choice.
It usually begins with a really familiar moment. You know the one. You open a tab on your computer. You see a new opportunity. Maybe it's a new job, a different city, or even a completely different country. And for just a few seconds, you actually allow it to exist. Another totally different version of your life becomes visible. You can almost picture yourself doing the work, right? Walking down unfamiliar streets, starting over in a place where literally no one knows your name. For that brief, fleeting moment, your mind treats this possibility as entirely real. It doesn't ask if it's practical, it just explores.
But then, almost immediately, something interrupts you. Before that picture is even fully painted in your imagination, your mind just quietly starts doing the math. What about the mortgage? What about the kids? The salary? And just like that, the tab closes. The possibility disappears. Now, we usually call that a decision. But think about it. Why does it feel completely decided before you even truly evaluated what that new life could be?
Section 1. You still have choices. Agency is not lost.
Let's be absolutely clear here. The system hasn't stolen your freedom. There are no locked doors, and you certainly aren't imprisoned by the life you've built. Technically speaking, all those possibilities are entirely available to you. You could pack a bag today, right now, and walk through that open door. But as you'll see, calling a door open actually tells us surprisingly little about what it truly costs to walk through it.
Section 2. Unequal paths, unequal costs. The architecture of stability.
You see, while both options genuinely exist, they definitely don't start from the same line. Freedom always exists inside an architecture. Just look at the contrast here. Continuing your current life inherits all the infrastructure that already exists, but moving to a new city? That demands the complete, exhausting cost of rebuilding from scratch. One path simply inherits the system, while the other actually has to negotiate with it.
We call this dynamic accumulated compatibility. It's kind of like trying to switch from an Apple to an Android phone. I mean, it's technically possible, sure, but your photos, your apps, your passwords, they're all perfectly synced right where you already are. In your life, your income supports your housing, which dictates your daily routines. Together, these dependencies create a massive, undeniable structural advantage for the path you are already walking. Section 3. Cost enters as personal judgment. System cost becomes psychological. The fascinating part is that you don't actually experience switching costs as some abstract, systemic concept. Instead, that structural asymmetry enters your mind in very subtle stages. First, staying put is just easier. Then, you tell yourself it's more practical. Next, well, it just makes the most sense. And finally, it feels right. The immense cost of changing your life enters your mind completely disguised as responsible personal judgment.
Section 4. Continuation becomes personal preference, repeatedly choosing the cheaper path.
Every single day you're evaluating your options, and repeatedly, the cheaper, less disruptive path wins out, as you choose it over and over again. Continuation stops feeling merely like the easy option. It begins to feel like a genuine, authentic preference. The path that required the least amount of reconstruction, it slowly starts to look like your greatest personal truth.
And that brings us to a rather uncomfortable question. How much of what feels like a deeply personal preference to you was actually produced by a system making one option dramatically easier to inhabit? Think back to when you closed that tab for the new city. Was it truly because you preferred to stay, or was it because your current life had already quietly decided whether another one would even be allowed to exist?
Section 5. When preference becomes identity. The self aligns with the structure.
This consequence eventually reaches the very core of who you believe you are. Just look at how this builds over time. On day 1, a different path is just available. By year 1, staying is practical. By year 5, it's preferred. But by year 10, the path itself becomes me. You start making profound identity statements like, I'm settled, or that fast-paced life just isn't for me. A purely structural label has transformed into a definition of your very self.
This is me. That is such a powerful realization. But notice exactly what happened here. The system didn't dictate your identity directly. It didn't force you to become anyone. It just made this one specific version of yourself incredibly cheap to maintain, while making any alternative version require massive, exhausting structural renegotiation.
Section 6. The path that became you. The final integration. We finally arrived at the core of Layer 3. The external map of your continuity and the internal map of your identity have gradually become the exact same diagram. The path you walked purely because it was structurally supported has quietly morphed into the self you believe you inherently are.
This right here is the true, ultimate consequence of building a stable life. You gradually begin experiencing structural convenience as profound self-knowledge. Because one path is just so much easier, you literally lose the ability to view your options neutrally. Now, this isn't malicious manipulation, it's just identity developing inside a very specific architecture. Ultimately, structure wins, but crucially, not by defeating you. The system never actually replaced your agency. It never took away your ability to choose. It simply and fully participated in the exact conditions under which that agency was exercised. It never told you who to become. It just made one version of you vastly easier to keep becoming.
You still made the choices, but you didn't make them from an empty space. You made them from inside a life where some futures already had paved roads, while others still needed infrastructure. You followed the road that already existed often enough that eventually it stopped feeling like the easiest road. It started feeling like you. So, I'll leave you with this. When you look at the life you have today, are you looking at the truest expression of your soul, or simply the path of least reconstruction? The ideas are human. The narration is digital. Interpretation remains yours.